use Israel as an example and the Jewish people. They united. They said, we may not like each other as individuals. When it comes to Israel, they stick together like super glue. The Jewish people own this little bitty tiny little piece of land, which is a desert. There's only 15 million Jews around the world compared to Africa. We have the largest landmass on earth, richest continent on earth, and over 400 million African diaspora. The Jews, their little bitty country that is a desert. Financially, they control the world, whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not, you have a vested interest in the betterment of Africa. From the rich resources it provides to the planet, to the multiple international migrant crises stemming from the exploitation of the African continent. The effects are profound and extensive. As a son of the diaspora who has returned to the motherland, I am personally aware of Africa's untapped potential. With so much potential, Africa must pay attention and learn from those who have effectively created power and agency for themselves. One such leader, Dr. Arikana Chihombori-Quao, has been vocal about how Africa can emulate the success of other groups. She's a public speaker, an educator, diplomat, and entrepreneur. Join Madinah and I as we listen and discuss her powerful words.
Are you familiar with Dr. Arikana?
From where?
You know what? I don't know which country she's from, but I see her on YouTube all the time.
She is.
What?
Like she.
It's a woman, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's on YouTube all the time, various social media. She's always talking about the uplifting of the African continent, but not just that. The problems and the solutions, or she puts forward her solutions.
Wow.
So we're going to watch her solutions or her ideas today, react to it, and we're going to see what we think about it.
Okay.
Allow me to share with you briefly that in 1945, 13 Jewish men met in the library. They didn't even have a place to meet. This was soon after Holocaust. The ideas they came up with during that meeting were based on two facts, two realizations: that there was a need for them to unite, for them to speak with one voice when it comes to issues pertaining to them and their country. They also realized that their unity was useless if they did not back it up with financial resources. So that is all they did. They united. They said, we may not like each other as individuals, but when it comes to their Jewishness, when it comes to Israel, they stick together like super glue. They also pulled out their financial resources. If I may stop for a second, use Israel as an example and the Jewish people.
She's already letting us know that whatever you think of Israel, whether good or bad, whichever side you are on when it comes to the war that's happening at the moment, they had a plan to, regardless of their individual disagreements, stick together and to put their money together.
Okay.
And I don't see that much in the African community. Although the African community is much bigger, so it's more difficult, but yes.
The Jewish people own this little bitty tiny little piece of land, which is a desert. There's only 15 million Jews around the world compared to Africa. We have the largest landmass on earth, richest continent on earth, and over 400 million African diaspora. The Jews, their little bitty country that is a desert. Financially, they control the world, whether you like it or not.
Wow.
15 million people. Whether you agree with whether they control the earth or not, they certainly have massive influence and power. Why do I say that? Because the war that's happening in Israel right now and the issues with the Palestinians in Gaza is discussed in every major parliament of the world as a top priority issue. Right now, if you look at the British government, they're discussing it. If you look at the American Senate, they're discussing it. The biggest powers in the world are discussing it. They're trying to intervene and manipulate and work in whatever way they can. The war in South Sudan, it's been tens of thousands of people are dying. Nobody's talking about it in any parliament. 15 million people versus 400 million diasporas in Africa.
What?
And, they have the world captivated.
When those Americans in Charlottesville were holding their tiki torches, talking about the Jews will not replace us, you never saw a single Jewish man on television complaining. They complain with their finances. Their dollars speak for them. Jews do not go and borrow money from anybody. They fund themselves. They're probably the most powerful people financially. Their money speaks for them. What do we do instead when George Floyd gets killed and many others? We're on the street, we make noise and that's it.
Like, I used to see on social media when, like, people used to say Black Lives Matter, but I used to see some people shot, like blacks had like died, something like that. Is that the group is saying?
Yeah, Black Lives Matter, that's right. So there were protests in Africa, there were protests all over the world for Black Lives Matter. But where was the money? The money that we put together went to the organization, and they even defrauded the money. So we couldn't even organize to come together for a common cause. We went on the streets and we shouted, but when it came down to the money, we couldn't organize to sort ourselves out.
If everybody that protested could put $1 and say, yes, we want to protest, but we're also going to do something about it, now we could get somewhere. We could get somewhere. Translate those voices into finances. Let's make that bridge. Let's create that bridge. Let's take a page from the Jews. Let's understand that as Black people, we are the most endangered species on earth. Let's also make a commitment that how long are we going to allow this carnage to go on? How long are we going to continue to be stupid? It's about the finances, my brothers and sisters. If we do not bring our finances together, if we do not understand that my $85 a month for a year is an investment in not only myself, but my children, my grandchildren, and generations to come, then who are we? What is the solution? Understand that the brain drain out of Africa started over 400 years ago with the children of Africa who were being taken out of Africa as slaves. Remember, when they were choosing which Africans to take out as slaves, they chose the fittest, the smartest, that who they felt would sustain and survive the rigorous journey across the Atlantic, followed by those who have left Africa in recent years in search of greener pastures, some running away from famine and wars. But the end result is Africans around the world are building other nations while we are allowing our beloved continent to languish or be exploited.
I actually knew a nurse in Kenya, and during COVID, I think it was 2 or 3 months, maybe more than that, that she didn't get paid.
Wow.
Right? During COVID. And then when they protested against that, they fired 10% of everyone that protested.
Oh my God.
Right? Then the rest of them, they terminated their contracts and restarted their contracts. So they had to go back to the government offices and set up their paperwork. Okay, so when she went to reset up her paperwork, she had to bribe.
Oh, there's also bribing there.
Yeah, she had to bribe to get her paperwork reset up so that she could go back to work, to not get paid at the end of the month, just because she didn't want to lose her situation. Now, why wouldn't a medical professional like that, when the UK, when the Philippines, when Japan, when Australia is asking for nurses and asking for doctors, why would she stay there? And so what that means is the best talent from Africa leaves
Africa and go to other countries.
Exactly.
It's like leaving your country to go to other country to make it rich. I think we Africans, we don't believe in ourselves, or sometimes Africans in Africa, they don't pay you the way you want. So they think that
Yeah.
if they go to other countries, they may be paid at the level they want.
Right. They're not respected
Mm,
through the value of pay on the continent.
yeah.
I also know another nurse from Nigeria who retired, friend of my mom's. She was supposed to get pension. She worked for more than 40 years, 50 years as a nurse. She never got her pension.
Oh my God.
And what they found out was that someone was receiving her pension, but it wasn't her. And when they investigated who was receiving the pension, it was someone that was deceased, which means that that money was being collected, which means that someone had created a fraudulent situation where a dead nurse is collecting the money from a living person who's supposed to get a pension. That pension is supposed to help you survive between retirement and your death. Can you imagine that? You worked all your life
Man.
for the government or for whoever, and you can't get your pension. So yeah, Africans leave for greener pastures, and they get fed up, and then the unity is divided.
The colonizers have been in Africa for centuries. All they have succeeded at doing is building infrastructure designed to do nothing but extract resources out of Africa. That's all they have done, and that's all they plan to continue to do. We're the only ones who can change that paradigm. And that means the African diaspora must wake up. That means the African diaspora must understand what is really going on and not understand Africa from the eyes of the colonizers, from the eyes of the media that have chosen to paint Africa as a diseased and dying continent in need of rescue. Let's understand our Africa as African diaspora. Let's understand our role. It's very difficult for African businessmen in Malawi, in Botswana, to think continental. They're struggling to make a living in that little bitty country with all the restrictions and the difficulties of reaching to the country next door, to then ask that same businessman to think continental.
Every businessman is here fighting, dealing with corruption, dealing with paperwork and red tape and bureaucracy just to get their business off the ground, to survive. That's such a good point.
But the people who can help with that bridge, the people who are already integrated in a way, people who can come to Africa with an integrated mind, are the children of Africa in the diaspora. Like I said before, $1 million diaspora with $1,000, that's $1 billion. $1 billion is a lot of money.
There's 400 million diaspora. And she said $1 million diaspora with $1,000 is $1 billion. And that's 1 million out of 400 million. There's probably easily 1 million people in Africa that could afford that, let alone those outside. She said about people with the integrated mind. That's why I'm in Africa. It's not an easy road to follow, but it's a very rewarding one if you can do it.
And then you take that 1 billion, let's do it a year in and year out. Financial resources, we need to pull our funds together. We need to begin to look at our continent as a continent. What do the market women in Africa need today? How do we begin to make it possible for a market woman in Nigeria to sell to the market woman in Kenya what she cannot find in Kenya, but it's in Nigeria? How do we begin to loosen those trade barriers? It's a level one. I'm hoping that the African Continental Free Trade Area can begin to address those issues, but looking at what we have right now, when you see countries still blocking borders, still making it difficult for Africans to travel freely around the continent, all of our challenges, if you begin to understand them, they all go back to the mind.
I hear lots of business people, big business people, Dangote, the biggest Nigerian business guy, complaining about this, not being able to go across borders and do business and import and export. And we need to do something about that for sure. I don't know how we would go about collecting and pooling our money in such a way. It sounds really good what she's saying, but in actual fact, it would be a very tough thing to get a singular viewpoint for everyone to come behind.
We must open up our Africa. We need a single African currency. It's just that simple. We can't talk about the AFCFTA and still have 44 different currencies. We can't talk about a single Africa if we still have to carry a passport to travel around our country. We can't talk about progress within Africa if we still are having to fight all these various wars in the different countries as little bitty different military. Africa needs to truly begin to look at what are the needs of the continent. How do we move 1.27 billion people? Let's have a strategy for that. How do we feed 1.27 billion people? Let's have a strategy for that. How do we house? How do we clothe 1.27 billion people? That thinking outside the box is what's really going to give us the results that we desire.
The bottom line is we need to unite. Within Uganda, where we are now, even the tribes, they don't get on very well with each other.
You're right.
The same in Nigeria, the tribes don't get on well with each other. And I'm sure that's the same in many other African countries. We just have to put that aside. We just need to say we're content with being the bottom of the world. We're content with all the resources going out. We're content with everybody else getting what they want from the continent without us getting what we deserve from the land of our ancestors.